So welcome everyone to this fourth session of the day. After 3 rich sessions where we talked about where we are at, what are the actions needed, here we're going to talk about implementation, and we are going to focus on action. We'll be attentive here again to concrete proposals and commitments, as we've been in the previous session. And let's have a reminder again that the stakes are extremely high due to potentially large-scale systemic risks to our mental health, civil rights, environment, and globally to the world as we know it. So we also need to be ready to tackle these challenges as well as to seize the opportunities that come in our way thanks to AI. So I'm Caroline Ginmer from the Future Society, and I'm delighted to moderate this session where we'll be sharing findings from our groundbreaking global consultation of citizens and experts. This was done with Meg.org, the AI and Society Institute, Sciences Po Tech Hub, and CNNum, in partnership too with the AI Action Summit. So what makes these findings particularly powerful is their dual validation. They've been shaped by citizens and complemented by experts. And that was done across 5 continents. The result is a set of concrete, actionable deliverables that align public interest with expert priorities, ready to be announced at the AI Action Summit in February. For this session, we are honored to have participants who will briefly share different perspectives on the consultation. We have Constance Deleuze, Executive Director of the AI and Society Institute, along with Pierre Neuro from Sciences Po Tech and Global Affairs Innovation Hub, and they will present an overview of the consultation process and its key results. Next, Axel Dochet, President and founder of Meg.org, will share insights from the citizen consultation. I will do a deep dive into the expert consultation, and following this presentation, we'll hear reactions from our distinguished summit envoys. Anne Bouverot, Special Envoy of the French President to the AI Action Summit, Henri Verdier, Ambassador for Digital Affairs and Envoy for Global AI Governance, Roxanne Varza, Envoy for Innovation and Culture and Director of Station F, and Claire Foulquier-Gazagnes, Advisor to the Public Interest Envoy, Martin Tisnet. After our discussion with participants both in this room and online, Jean Catan, Secretary General of the French National Digital Council, will conclude our session with reflections on the role of public participation in AI governance. Finally, to our online audience that has several hundred of people right now, welcome wherever you are. Your role is crucial to critique our conversation and ensure we remain focused on the public interest. The world is watching and expects concrete progress on AI governance. So, Constance,
Thank you very much, Caroline, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the OECD. The OECD has a long-standing experience in multi-stakeholder processes, so this is a natural place to present the results of our consultation of civil society and experts around the world. Thank you also to our partners, CNNum, MAKE, and of course, the Future Society for a very fruitful collaboration over the past few months. Thank you very much. And we also wanted to thank the AI Summit team for their openness with regards to this process, for allowing us to bring these multi-stakeholder views into the preparations of the summit. So with our partners, we've organized 2 specific consultations to allow everyone to be able to express its voice: civil society, experts, academics, and organizations from around the world. We have received thousands of contributions, over 200 expert papers, and thousands of contributions from individuals. I would just like to, before handing the floor to my colleague Pierre, who's going to give a quick overview of the result, just mention that this process is not intended to represent all civil society organizations. This is one process among others, one voice among others. And with this, Pierre, the floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to present the results of those two consultations that we've been very hard at work to get them in front of you. It's a difficult task. I have to be less bland and less abstract than an LLM to summarize thousands of contributions. So just to explain, we've extracted 4 main takeaways from each consultations, and then I'll introduce you to the 5 top priorities that we've inferred from them regarding the summit. And so starting with the public, the open consultation, the first takeaway that I want to highlight is that participation was wide, diverse, and led to the expression of sophisticated and nuanced views on AI. With that in mind, any discourse claiming that the public lacks basic awareness and literacy to engage with governance should be questioned and, I believe, pushed aside. Second thing, that being said, there is a unanimous support for more education resources to be made available and accessible to all, regardless of gender, ethnicity, wealth, revenue, and age. AI training is seen as essential, not just to adapt to social transformations, but also to empower citizens to engage actively in governance and enable equitable, fair distribution of AI benefits. The third one that I want to point out is that the public strongly rejects AI solutionism. That is, a scenario in which AI is developed everywhere for everything in an uncontrolled setting dominated by private interest. Instead, they express support for international governance that enables collective use of AI to answer concrete real-world problems. They prioritize sectors that enhance human expertise and public trust, such as health, public innovation, climate action, fight against disinformation, and others. Interestingly enough, the consultations that we've undertaken with experts and CSOs converge with these takeaways and complete them. They join the public in their call for strong international governance, and they want to be part of a multi-stakeholder governance framework at all stages, from policy design to implementation and evaluation. They want actionable international standards to evaluate, audit, and compare models in terms of transparency, fairness, environmental impact, and privacy. These standards must safeguard existing rights, promote accountability, and guide adoption and investments. Experts and CSOs want the summit to address both current harms, but also long-term systemic threats and catastrophic risks. In particular, they support a greater coordination on AI safety research, verifiable enforcement of thresholds, and other forms of control on large-scale models. The last takeaway from this consultation is that they are particularly concerned by the amplification of existing inequalities through deployment of AI systems, whether they are gender-based, income-based, ethnicity-based, and at a larger scale between global North and global South. They support enforceable mechanisms which enhance diversity, representation, and ensure anyone can harness effectively and equitably AI. And so this takes us to 5 main priorities that we want to share with the summit leaders and envoys. The first one is that the summit must be a foundational moment for strong and recurring multi-stakeholder governance process. The second one is that it must ensure access to qualitative AI education and training for everyone. The third one is that the summit must establish global, verifiable standards for safe and responsible AI. The fourth one is that sustainability of development and deployment of AI is non-negotiable. We must ensure benefits outweighs the costs, even when it comes to the environment, or especially when it comes to environment. And the fifth one is that the summit must prioritize AI solutions, addressing existing challenges, protecting existing rights. This is only but a very, very, very quick overview that leaves aside most of the stimulating ideas and suggestions offered by the participants in the consultation. So I strongly invite you to check out the complete report, especially to discover the deliverables that were suggested by the civil society organizations. I think that's all the time we have for this for now.
Thanks so much, Pierre. And now I'd like to welcome Axel Daucher, president of Make.org, who will share with us the results of the citizen consultation.
Hi, everyone. Very nice to be with you today. And I have the difficult task to represent the citizens in the rooms, which is always a tricky thing, and specifically in that topic. Why is the citizen's voice interesting in that debate? Considering the heterogeneous level of maturity of the citizens and the complexity of the stakes. And by the way, it is maybe more important than ever, because that's the first time that we can have a glance of finally or their response to the reality of AI, even if they don't understand it very concretely. So considering the context, it's not the time yet for closed question where you score their acceptance of everything, because they really citizens are understanding a very different level of complexity. And so the thing we did is we asked an open question to millions of citizens. What are your ideas for shaping AI to serve the public good? And so they could respond in many, many directions. And so we had a tremendous traction to this question, because practically we had more than 11,000 citizens who answered to it, 600 proposals, and more than 120,000 votes on those proposals. Very interestingly, we could track where the people came from, and 90% of the contribution came from citizens, not from civic organization of things. They were pretty representative on the gender balance, but also on the age balance. So it doesn't make it a poll, but at least it gives a clear view about the reality of the perception of AI by the citizens. So when we look, first of all, about the thematics that were addressed, that were discussed by citizens, we saw a wide spread of thematics, and with some major one around the role of AI, of course, the governance, the organization and process, education, regulation. So all those thematics were discussed. But the most important thing is not the fact they are discussed, it's on which of those thematics the people are converging. And so it led to a kind of a mapping of 15 ideas on which all the citizens were engaged and agreeing all together, and 9 controversial ideas. So all those ideas were split in 6 boxes, as you see: AI education, governance and democracy, transparency and trust, public interest, managing the impact of AI on society, and also AI and our environment. So right away, I will not go through those materials, and there is a full report that will be fully accessible to anyone. So let me give you just a few ingredients and few conclusions we can get from the heterogeneous feedback from citizens. First of all, they're all calling for ethical and global governance, global/European, let's say global governance framework. And that's not surprising. What's interesting, they did not mention so much the large AI companies. For them, it's much more a question of public authority, states, governments, not definitely the public company, which was a surprise, was not quoted so much. Second thing, there is always a question about the techno-optimism, techno-skepticism. They are not on both sides. If we want to get the kind of the vibes of the citizens, let's say they are in a constructive vigilance regarding the arrival of AI. Definitely, they agree on some points, like they always want a human to decide at the end on the things, but there is no consensus of both of the extremes. However, they are all conscious about the anthropological risk. So it's not the question of they are totally naive, it's just a question that they don't know, as we are, okay? So no more, no less, I guess. I'm sure if we do the same kind of things, internally we'll have the same kind of things. Third point, they are very clear about some areas on which AI could work. You know, let's move on health, on research, on disaster management, no question. However, when it comes to education, when it comes to democracy, when it comes to defense, say, wow, this is where the vigilance become a kind of a fear to be addressed. And a very global point, it's the last global point, the fact that AI in about everything, it's at the same time the problem and the solution. So at the conclusion, I would say, and I'll make the connection with the previous discussion. The previous discussion, and I'm not trying to summarize it, but it was a discussion about is the risk about with AI enough to allow and to provocate global governance. We discussed a lot about that just before. It's just hiding another issue, which is the dilemma between the individual interest from AI companies and from states or from governments on the global interest. And finally, the real limit is not the consciousness of the thing, is how do we deal with the dilemma? And that's why, and I will finish by that, the citizen's voice is very important. Because citizens' voice is the link between individual interests from companies and states and global interest. So at this very moment, the citizen voice is not enough mature to be used. But let's start with it, just build on the consensus, and maybe we'll find a way of balancing between individual interest and global interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Axel. Thank you so much. So I will build on your consultation findings and focus on what the experts have said about those questions. So we conducted this consultation with a lot of expert and civil society organizations representing hundreds of experts. So this is not only about numbers, it's also about diversity. We had scientific institutions, academic centers, policy think tanks, artist associations, unions, and local and global nonprofit. Many of them are in the room today. So thank you so much for your contributions. A lot of you contributed to this consultation, and I hope that I will be able to represent faithfully what you said. So regarding our methodology, we started with a large data collection focused on a survey, but this was not like a normal survey because we focused on the questions of the envoys that they sent us, and we asked specifically for concrete deliverables for the summit. We invited over 200 organizations with a global outreach across 5 continents, and in our interim analysis, we reviewed the first 84 submissions, we identified emerging themes, and we shared it publicly to check that we were on track. For the final analysis that I'm presenting today, we had 202 submissions. And what we did for that is that we just counted the number of times the priorities were mentioned by the different organizations to ensure we were fair and representing what global CSOs were telling us. Out of this consultation, we have results. in the form of 15 key deliverables and 20 expert insights that I'll share today. So concretely, we asked for each of the themes, we asked experts, what were your priorities? And then they also answered the key questions posed by the summit's envoys. Out of these out of this combination of priorities and insights, we made, based on the expert proposal, actionable next steps and proposals for deliverables. So for global AI governance, our first theme under Henri Verdier is here. So the experts had the first priority of their experts, was having more strategic vision and alignment for future AI summits. So the end goal was to assign a permanent governing body for the global AI summits. But in the meantime, we could have a task force with the focus on having clear goals for the next summit and having things like membership criteria. So that could be, for example, the Paris Pact task force. The second priority was to have more scientific consensus on AI risks. And for that, experts were really pro having an international scientific collaboration on AI that would be similar to the IPCC and building on the State of Science report. And that could be part of the existing UN proposal on the panel, but that could also be something different but complementary that would have a faster cycle for publication. The third priority, and that is very important for the goals of the summit, is broader inclusion in global AI governance. And for that, we had specific mechanisms for civil society organization and global South inclusion. And that could be, for example, having a global South and a global North countries, like both countries co-organizing a summit. And that could be also having a sort of council inside the organization of the summit with CSOs. For trust in AI, the top priority, and that was mentioned today a lot, so that is not surprising, is having enforceable red lines for advanced AI development. So even though maybe time is short for defining and publishing thresholds for AI oversight by February, experts also proposed a system to get to that point. The second one was enhancing responsible scaling policies that build on AI safety commitments. So the concrete proposal of experts was an AI cooperation commitment report card. And that way, really, we can sort of check on what the companies have promised and build accountability, the theme of today's event. The last proposal in that theme was a stronger international network of AI safety institutes. So we have today representatives of those safety institutes. And the idea was to develop a collaborative testing framework for that network, for that new network. And for public interest AI, we had the most popular deliverables across all themes. So we put it there. That was unified standards for auditing AI systems. So having a system with third-party evaluators, they could check that roadmap for global AI auditing standards from the summit. So across all themes. The second one was having clearer public interest AI guidelines. And I think that would potentially work really well with the proposed fund of the summit, which is, so experts proposed a global charter for public interest AI with a new definition of public interest AI. And we have in the full report a draft charter. Third, we know they want more processes for citizen engagement in AI governance, and from the civil society organizations, we had really specific proposals on an AI Commons initiative to empower citizens in AI design so they can give feedback on specific AI designs. On the crucial issue of the future of work, yes, just like what the citizens wanted, we experts wanted to have both an initiative on the risks and on the opportunities. And so experts suggested to create a global AI education and critical thinking initiative. And that could be in the format, for example, of a mobile app in 6 languages that could be started at the summit. The second priority was to have better policies for AI transitions and job protection. So, for example, the summit could launch an international task force on AI and labor market disruptions with really concrete deliverables, such as a worker protection toolkit with an impact assessment of what the AI is going to impact in the organization. Lastly, for that theme, we had AI-specific educational and training programs with the Global AI Talent Program for the Global South. For our last theme, innovation and culture, we really saw a big priority here for green AI development. So yes, this was this idea of a green AI leaderboard popular among all the submissions to track and incentivize model sustainability improvements. We also had a few questions from our envoy here, Roxanne Varza, on ethical governance and protection of cultural data rights. And so here also expert proposed standards for cultural data and AI intellectual property rights, so that, for example, there are standards on metadata, a cultural data market, that it would facilitate this market. And lastly, we had proposals for global funding for AI governance and research. And here, that would be with a focus on AI ethics, safety, and equity. And for example, experts proposed an initiative on cultural innovation and equity with a focus on developing a market, a cultural market that is fair. And that could be part of the new fund created by France, like as another track. So going back to the overall consultation with the citizens and the experts, we have clear priorities, laying the foundation for strong global multi-stakeholder global AI governance, having AI education and training for everyone, establishing shared standards for safe and responsible AI, ensure AI's environmental benefits outweigh its costs, and prioritizing AI solutions addressing existing issues, protecting our rights. So now this is the time where this is the first time we really present these results to the world and to the envoy. We did all of this for you. So now we're really interested in your feedback. So we would love to hear your reactions on how these proposals could shape the summit's outcome. So I invite each of you to share your thoughts on this. Anne, would you like to begin?
Yes, let me see if that works. Yes, that works. Well, first of all, thank you very much. Thank you to everyone here, of course, each and every one of you who presented the synthesis, but also I extend my thanks to the thousands of people who have contributed. I think that's the first thing, to see the strong interest that both citizens and experts have in this. And if only for this, I think this consultation was really worth it. So that's great. The second thing is, in terms of the overall sort of configuration of the answers, where people overall are coming from, and you said it, Axel, and you said it also, Carol, the feedback is not, let's stop AI. The feedback is not, AI will solve everything, we don't need to worry. People or citizens and experts are very mature, and it's very heartening to realize that yes, this will, as any technology, this presents risks and this presents opportunities. And I'm particularly happy with that, because the theme of the summit is action. And the idea is action because, yes, there are risks and we need to act to mitigate the risks. And there are benefits and opportunities, and we need to make sure we act to make them possible and to maximize them in a vigilant way. I think that's one of the words that was said that I particularly like. Maybe a couple other reactions. I hear loud and clear the desire of citizens, of experts, and also representing voices from the South, to be part of the governance and the decisions and the shaping of the way AI is being developed. I think that's absolutely fair. That's also really what I hear when I travel, when I meet with people all around the world.
this desire to be part of the discussion and of the shaping, and in particular but not only countries from the South, pretty much every region and city I travel to, the desire to not just be customers of solutions that are provided by some technology companies, but also to be part of the shaping of local ecosystems. And I don't say this to be anti-big tech or anything, but it's really this idea of everyone wants to be able to be part of the conversation, and not just of the conversation, of the action and of the shaping and of the developing of local ecosystems. And I hear that really reflected in the consultation. So that's something that really I take loud and clear. Maybe my second comment is on sustainability. It comes across strongly. It wasn't a theme, I think, even a year ago, because there was a separate global conversation on climate and of course, a global conversation on AI, which started in particular at Bletchley Park. And I want to thank the representatives from the UK government who are here, and it continued in Seoul. But during the course of the year, it became evident that actually more and more electricity is needed for the development of AI, and this actually can have an impact on climate and on climate goals. And at the same time, it also is becoming evident that AI can help in terms of both climate mitigation and also helping with the transition. So that conversation on AI is developing. And it's heartening to see in the feedback from experts in particular, and also of citizens, that it's the two aspects that are there, maybe a little bit more on the risks on the citizen side, but also on the positive side. So again, very mature, I think, perception of this. And we will take the subject of sustainability as one of the conversations at the summit. And so this is very good. And maybe my last point, and I heard it in a number of different ways, number of different places, and it's public interest AI, but it's also trust, it's also governance. This notion of the commons, what are the commons, the digital commons in AI that we can, that we should, that we could try to develop and make visible, possible, and concrete at the summit and beyond. I think that's also something that I really like. Commons in terms of safety standards, for example, or safety tools, commons in terms of common discussions, and also commons in terms of the things that AI can bring, and that maybe economic interests will not be able to bring because they're aimed at developing specific use cases with economic benefits. So I'll probably stop here because I know there's a number of other things that Roxanne and Henri and Claire will want to say. But again, thank you, because I find this really, really rich and really positive as we are still on the road to the summit and are still building the agenda. So thank you for this.
Thank you. It's really helpful to have your vision and how you can include these sort of ideas from experts and citizens. Now, I would like maybe to turn to Henri Verdier, the Summit Envoy for Global AI Governance. So what do you think of the results? What do you think of the deliverables? And do you think you could include some of them in your theme?
Yes. Maybe first a small comment regarding something else. I've heard twice Global South in this room this afternoon. I don't like this expression. That's a bit dismissive for this variety of countries, culture, tradition, origin, situations. And if you consider that there is a Global South, you consider that there is a Global North and a fatal war, confrontation. And we don't share this vision. So pay attention, please, in your statements. Regarding the report, first, thank you again, as Anne said, because taking time and money and organization and work to organize this kind of conversation and to put the citizen at the center of the reflection is very important. At the end of the day, we are supposed to build progress for human beings. not just a more efficient companies or whatever, but progress for citizens. And that's very important to put the feedback in the room. And I hope that we'll succeed with Anne and the team to give them as much volume as possible during the summit. Yes, I think I could sign most of the proposals there, and that would be a bit boring this afternoon. So I will try to contest a bit, but they are interesting, mature, implementable. Some that can be, you can assess some of them. They are precise, and so I like this. The question of a permanent governing body needs to be discussed with the UN system, because I don't know if the UN system wants one more permanent body. So let's have this conversation in depth. So I could embrace and sign quite everything. I will just add 2 observations. So first, I note that there is a kind of general demand of dignity, respect of the rule of law, citizen empowerment, meaningful progress, democratic choices, which are not always what we are first when we go to business meetings, for obvious reasons. So so far that's manageable, but we have to pay attention to this, because if we let those 2 conversations split, we can have to face some consequences. And as President Macron recalls often, we can take attention to the story of genetically modified organisms. You remember GMO, because we did dream about a world with plants growing in the desert, with plants with vaccines in the fruit, with whatever you can imagine. The industry did not really try to finance this kind of research. And at the end of the day, what did happen? In Europe, we did ban GMO culture in our soil, because the citizens were a bit afraid and didn't see any interesting progress for them. So they did just refuse what was and is still a promising research field. So we could have to face something like this even for AI if we let this kind of splits between investment and what the people want. And my second point, and maybe that's the most difficult, of course, that's from my point of view what is missing from both propositions. You know, the world is not made up of people trying hard to maximize global happiness within a strong ethical framework. That's not just this. And the world is structured by a ruthless competition. There is a real geopolitical competition. There is a strong competition between AI companies. There will be soon a competition on the value chains between AI companies and the other companies. And within this, of course, people don't set up a business to do harm. People start, I did start 3 companies. People start with a great ethical ambition. They want to not to be evil at the beginning. And that's usually within the competition that they abandon their principles. And that, so in war, for example, we call this escalation. So the question is not to decide together what is supposed to be the best. The question is about the implementation in a world of ruthless competition. And so the question is the implementation strategy. So in law, we speak about law enforcement, and we know that there is no great system of law enforcement for the international relations so far. We don't have a supranational authority. Here, this is more than just law enforcement. This is also, maybe we should conceive a concept, ethical enforcement, security enforcement, I don't know, but something in this field. And I come to a point that Anne made. I feel that those strategies will require more than just text and even authorities, because the machinery matters. If we want to rebalance the power, if we want to nudge the future of those technologies in a certain direction, we need to pay attention to infrastructure, data, open source software, all this machinery, and we look to work together to redistribute power and stabilize this kind of competition. That are just few remarks regarding your work.
Thank you very much. And do you think that you could, that's very helpful. And also, do you think you could actually implement those ideas, the international scientific panel, the mechanisms for CSO and Global South inclusion, assigning a permanent governing body, or at least having a task force with goals for the next summits?
Okay. I think that are very promising ideas, and we will try to take some of them. But let's face it too. So we'll first speak around Anne with the 5 envoys. Then we'll speak with the French authorities in an interministerial conversation. Then with Europe. Then we did convene 80 head of states. So there will be a strong international conversation, including the UN system and the OECD. So I cannot completely predict the result of this conversation. But the 3 ideas in my field on governance are great ideas, simple, implementable, accessible. So I take them as very good contribution, and I can promise just to inject them in the conversation.
Thank you very much for this commitment. That is inspiring to all of us. And then Roxanne, Varza, so you're the envoy. What are your thoughts about these proposals for innovation and culture, and notably on the mandatory auditable model efficiency standards and the global green AI leaderboard?
Thank you so much. I will join Anne and Henri in saying thank you. Quite blown away by these results, by the engagement, and by the participation that you guys had. So thank you very much for that. I'm also very reassured by what I see, because I can see that it joins quite a lot of what we have already begun to work on and some of the key themes that we have identified already. So you asked Henri when you started, will you be able to implement these deliverables? If I was asked the same question, I would say yes. I think, in fact, we're already working on very, very similar topics. I also want to go back to something that Anne mentioned earlier and say, yes, probably about a year ago, the environmental component was probably not as present in the discussion. And even when we started working on the summit within innovation and culture, it was not evident from the start how important it would be. With time, we have really heard a lot of very strong voices. And so today we have a number of deliverables that we're working on in this space, whether it be encouraging more frugality in developing AI, whether it be developing standards for measuring environmental impacts, best practices for green data houses, data centers. So there's actually quite a few, and that's not even the full list. We have quite a few that we're working on. So just to reassure people in the room that contributed, and you yourself as well. I would also say that we have quite a bit around cultural protection. So I think we're really heading in the same way. And then with regards to funding for equitable AI, we also have addressed quite a bit within. We've identified the themes as sustainability, culture, and competition, but competition in the sense that we need to allow for young innovators to also develop what they feel is important. And so that also kind of rejoins this theme as well. So I'm quite reassured by what I saw, and I'm quite confident that we'll be able to move in the same direction. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. And did you also have the global green AI leaderboard?
So to say, but we do deliverables that we're working on that do involve ranking and providing best practices. So there may be something that we can find or even look into going in this direction. I'll have to obviously reserve this for the discussion with the rest of the team, but I do think we are actually quite aligned on this piece.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for your reflection. And I agree, it's reassuring. So I hope other people feel the same way, and we're going to open very soon the discussion to the entire room and to people online too, as we have a lot of questions from the people online. So we now have our last representative of an envoy, Claire Foulquier-Gazagnes, advisor to the Public Interest Envoy, Martin Tisnet. So what is your perspective on these deliverables, and do you think they could be included in the summit?
Okay, rookie mistake. Thank you so much, Caroline. And a huge thank you to the 1,100 people who have contributed. I'm also very amazed by the number, the depth, the gender, and the geographical diversity. So amazing work on this. Like Roxanne, I was surprised in a good way because I think many of the things that were mentioned are points on which we are currently working on. So just let me summarize what I've heard, making sure that yeah, we are aligned. I heard from Constance and Pierre that citizens were calling and asking AI to answer concrete problems on a topic like health, sustainability, public innovation, and so on. I heard from Alex that there was this dilemma between individual interest and collective global interest, and we are right in the middle of it. And I also heard from you, Caroline, this great proposal and the top voted one calling for standard for audits, but also the chart and the call for clearer citizen engagements. So this is what I heard. What will we do with this? So first, this is feeding into a very collaborative process. Ourselves, we also have been engaging many civil society organizations. We have held since June meeting with 400 of them at a regular basis. We are also having a working group with Brazil, Morocco as chair, and also here a multi-stakeholder approach. So all of this is going to feed into this collaborative effort because we would not be a public interest track if we were just discussing this among ourselves. And then some quick answers on the deliverable. So first on the auditing AI system, we are hearing you loud and clear, and it's also something we have heard quite a lot. And so that's why we are working on it. We are hoping to have a dedicated moment during the summit on this, and we are working on this with civil society organization and organization like Data in Society, Partnership on AI, and many others. On the topic of AI comments, it's also an idea we have heard. Your framing is interesting, like you are focusing it a lot on AI design. We are hearing it being spelled out in different ways, but it's definitely something we are working on, and we are working on an initiative that will allow us to put some resources on this topic. Resourcing being potentially money, but also other type of resources, data, and so on. So here as well, we are hoping to have some very concrete deliverable. And again, massive thank you to the team, the several organizations that have worked on this to get so many participants.
Well, thank you to the envoys for really considering and I think including already the deliverables in your thinking for the summit. So we'll have the report, the 4-pager of the report just outside the room. But before we get to this, now is the time where I'm going to invite a lot of you to give your insights on what you've heard. So the sort of like, what do you think of the deliverables? Which one do you think is a priority for the summit? And how do you think we should foster more civil society organizations and the public at large discussions on these topics? So you can put your card on the side, and I'll be glad to call you. So first we have Deborah, yes, Reggie from the Mozilla Foundation, and then we'll have Maya Wiley.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on something that Anne, you mentioned earlier in your remarks on, common digital infrastructure and that being an objective of public interest AI. I think one of these public consultation outcomes kind of revealed something that I've experienced interacting with civil society folks, and I'm sure Maya has more to say about this, and Janet and others at Data and Society, where there is this resistance to the notion of AI solutionism. And so I understand the aspiration of public interest AI through the lens of sort of modeling, effective AI governance for sort of public interest objectives that aligns with the UN sort of priority of building AI to address, sustainability goals, et cetera, global sustainability goals. But I do think a lot of the technical investment that civil society is looking for is around the sort of audit and accountability space. And so the project that I led at Mozilla was on open source AI auditing tools and tooling. And so one of the things that we discovered was we did a landscape analysis of a lot of the resources that AI audit practitioners were using in their work to sort of evaluate, analyze, understand these systems from the outside as these third-party stakeholders. And we found that there's a lot of resources to help support performance analysis, for example, but there's not a lot of resources for a couple things. And I'll just name 3 of them that I thought might be worth discussing. And obviously I'll follow up with you guys after. One is, centralizing and supporting harms discovery. So a lot of civil society is getting inbound from different places as to, what their constituents who are the impacted population, and sometimes not even necessarily overlapping with AI product users are experiencing, and they need kind of technical infrastructure and even some institutional infrastructure to facilitate communicating the harms that they're hearing inbound from their constituents to any kind of government representative. And this could be in the form of, an incident database. There's these AI inventories that support the visibility of the types of vendors that are being used by different public entities, and that allows civil society to report more concisely exactly what their constituents are reporting. But it could be something as simple as, regular roundtables with civil society geared towards this idea of supporting them in coming to common taxonomies of harms that they're hearing from their constituents. The second thing is sort of facilitating AI audit execution. I won't get too much into the details of this. I know on the roadmap for the AI Action Summit is this idea of an audit tooling catalog to sort of lower the barrier for participation in AI audit work and AI evaluation work. I think a lot of civil society is handicapped in certain ways in terms of the technical capacity to do that kind of work. And so any kind of technical infrastructure that lowers that barrier or standardizes best practices is highly appreciated. I want to call out, the NIST RMF, like the risk management framework. It's a very simple document, quote unquote, it's long, but it's like pretty high level. But it's, cited in like so many of the AI audit work that we experience. And it's because it's the only thing that's there. And so if there was something that was, more accessible or more available, I think people would actually use it. And this is not just an experience that I've had. I've talked to other AI audit practitioners, and they've had similar experiences of, very simple interventions going a really long way because there's effectively nothing else. And then on the last point, this idea of meta accountability for actors, AI auditors in this space, where we can't assume that everyone that claims to be an AI auditor has a certain degree of competence to produce a valid audit. We can't assume that they are independent in the way that we would expect them to be. So thinking a little bit about what auditor conduct standards would look like, and how a role that the AI Action Summit or the International Network of AI Safety Institutes or other groups could play in establishing those conduct standards. I'll end there, but super happy to talk more. And I really love this idea of looking at common digital infrastructure. What are the opportunities for us to work together across different countries, or in a centralized way to build resources for everyone?
Thanks a lot. And before giving the floor to Maya, I also wanted to ask the labs and the AI corporations to sort of please stand up, but prepare their answers to the proposal on commitment card. So what can you do to follow up on your commitment from Seoul? A lot of experts have emphasized this, so please be ready to answer this question after Maya's intervention, please.
Thank you. And what she said, and Deborah, but I want to elevate kind of two things. The multi-stakeholder engagement and governance is critical, and I think Deb is speaking to that. But when we think of it, multi-stakeholder engagement, this issue of marginalized communities of people who are often the edge cases. If we think about people with disabilities, for example, if you are a person with a disability, you are often located as an edge case. Yet 11% of my city are people with disabilities, just of New York City alone. So if you think about the size of population, and also the fact that those edge cases are often people who may have multiple marginalizations. So maybe low income, people of color, immigrants, any women, The point is that it has to be deeply embedded, frankly, in every single one of those, but to prioritize this notion of what it means to be inclusive of those who are traditionally marginalized in what we say and mean by multi-stakeholder engagement. And that's why so much of what Deb said is important to carry through. And so when we talk about, there was a innovation around protecting rights and protecting against biases and human rights, and what we would also in the US call civil rights. It is critical that that's actually something that there's a lot of energy for, both within the civil rights community as civil society, but from communities. And in fact, if we think about how we ensure that there's not a ladder pulled up behind the ability of communities, and I'm thinking about the cultural point and small use cases, the opportunity for communities to innovate their own innovations with the technology is part of being more equitable and inclusive. So that has to be embedded in it. And I think that's carried in several of these very important things that we have on this list. So it is hard to pick one, but I'm picking those two because I think they're so critical to force us all to hold the lenses and ensure the engagement of the people who are so often going to suffer if we do not. And I just want to make one other point that we should not lose. The conversation today was incredibly rich and important. And I could literally say I agree with almost everything I heard because I don't see them in competition with one another. But what I will say is we want standards in civil society as well. We want the ability, but we want to prevent the harms so that we don't have to litigate completely. The problem is we know we will have to, so we want both. But let me just say one thing about this notion of we shouldn't say just existential threat, but I have seen happening in the political discourse. Deb and I were actually in a very high level meeting full of US senators where won't name the whom, but we don't have to worry about bias and harms that are not going to be society ending because of society ending harms. It becomes a way to argue politically to pull the attention away from communities that are being harmed right now. And so I just say that to say, let's not put any of these things against each other, but recognize that small p political, I'm not talking partisan, small p political requires us to do all of this together at the same time, which is one of the reasons why we need multi-stakeholder engagement, because then we can accomplish that.
Yes, I do think CSOs across many different ones. It was really great to see during the consultation that you could have sort of the CSOs focused on ethics, the one focused on civil rights development or protection, I mean, those other focused on security, safety, etc., basically agree on what to do. Like they want standards, they want audits, that's for sure. They want more science collaboration. It was really heartening to see that we can do that. And I hope that we can build sort of in the future, a broader coalition to defend what we all believe in. So I want to call the companies, the AI corporations, and they are suspiciously only one around the table right now. So if my teammates can find the others that were here previously on their commitments, that would be great. But I would like to, yes, Martin, would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, thank you. I think what is really interesting is that a lot of the proposals that have ended up as a result of the consultation echoes what we've been discussing today. And I think there is one area that is really consensual, is the need for like standards, the need for like better benchmarks, the need for like shared evaluation framework. And I think this is really something that is needed both for like the civil society, for the government, and for the industry. This is clearly something where we need to have like convergence. Because at the end of the day, it's building better benchmarks, building better evaluation framework is something that requires a lot of resources, that requires like a lot of investment from all parties, because we are building like ever more capable models today. And this is clearly where we need that, we feel that there is a need for like greater convergence. And this is why, in our opinion, like the network of safety institute that was launched in February in SF 2 weeks ago was like very promising. And we believe there's clearly a way maybe for the Action Summit to build on that and have maybe a clear roadmap on what we want to build in terms of benchmarks. What do we want to evaluate exactly? And how do we want to build this? The network is like a very good platform for that. And how can we foster like public-private cooperation as part of this framework to build these better benchmarks? I think this is clearly something that is extremely important. And we've heard like from different pieces of the room, like calls for like better benchmarks, better metrics, and so on. Now, to the question of like reporting, because I think that was one of the things you wanted to get our opinion on. I think at OpenAI, we've been one of the first company, not the first one, but one of the first company to publish like the safety framework and to publish it, make it publicly available, to report on the implementation of this framework for the release of new models. We started to do that in June with the GPT-4o models. We did that again with the O1 models. And I think it goes back to the question of like these transparency measures we've taken are maybe not perfect. Maybe they can be like improved. And I think the big question is like, what kind of information needs to go into them? And back to the question of standardization. And this is what the code of practice of the European Union AI Act is starting to do. There are other places in the world that maybe starts to think about like what kind of like transparency mechanism, what kind of information needs to end up in these like safety framework and the reporting of this safety framework. But what is really important from our point of view is also to like avoid duplicative and redundancies across jurisdiction and to have like something streamlined. And this is why standards is really important, because at the end of the day, the amount of like engineering and technical resources that are going into this reporting is things that times and resources that cannot be devoted to like advanced safety work and testing on models and new things. So the more we will have like streamlined framework to provide meaningful transparency and meaningful accountability, the better it will be, I think, for everybody at the end of the day.
Do you think that OpenAI could develop such a framework for the summit to help the organizers with their card, like their commitment card? Do you feel like you could help with that? And maybe also, I wanted to ask Jack Clark and also Sebastian Krier. Yes, Krier?
Honestly, I cannot personally take the commitment on behalf of OpenAI, but I think it's something that we would prefer to have like a consensus. And I don't know who exactly. Is it the Safety Institute? Is it like a representative from the AI Action Summit to provide a template and to agree on that? There is like great work going on with the Hiroshima Code of Conduct that was mentioned, rather than us presenting something and then being accused of like being a forcing function of what we do. I think we'd prefer to have somebody else propose that.
Maybe just to come in on this, I think that there's an extremely urgent need for just standardization and coherence here, and we'd be really excited to support that. But, you know, further to these comments, you don't want the company to propose it. You want it to come from outside the companies, and then we give feedback in a democratic process.
Yeah, and just to, I guess, quickly answer the original question on what we'd be doing to on the civil commitments. I think there's plenty we've been doing, and I think we'll be continuing to do. On transparency, we've published quite a lot on technical documentation, model cards, and so on, and we report back on evaluation results in there as well. On risk thresholds and mitigations, you know, we've mentioned kind of the frontier safety frameworks and the RSPs. I think a lot more work needs to go there to standardize them and improve them, and you know, new versions will be coming out as well. But I think that's another way that we've been kind of acting on the civil commitments. On identifying risks, we've also published very detailed papers on evaluations, methodologies, both for socio-technical risk and frontier risks as well. And then lastly, with working with third parties, we've been working closely with AI safety institutes, NIST, and other kind of government bodies as well to help standardize a lot of this. But really echoing both Martin and Jack's comments that a lot of this standardization work is getting urgent, and having clarity across the board is in kind of everyone's interest. And we're also doing that, of course, with the code of conduct and other initiatives around the world. So
Yes, so I'm going to be very curious. Yes, I was about to look at the Frontier Model Forum. If you could help, maybe have something from the companies and maybe also from the AI Safety Institutes, as well as CSOs, I would think that having their inputs on something like this would be helpful, and work with the EU AI Act Codes of Practice on the standards before the summit could also be a method. Ima Bello, did you want to react to these ideas?
Does it work now?
Yeah.
Amazing. Hi. Thank you so much for having me. I'd like to focus my remark on participants. So going back to the consultation, participants rejecting AI solutions and controlled deployment. So the need to like safeguard rights and protect human agency. So focusing on defining and publishing thresholds for AI oversight, I'd like to express 4 points. The first one is that within the expert consultation, we've called for a multifactorial approach on risk threshold. I will not bore you with the details. I just want to say this approach would account for factors like training continuations, guardrail failures, and model modifications. And those 3 points, I think, should really be taken into account by all of us. Of course, I second the need for warning systems on AI incidents and AI harms. And I would add to that, having an international coordinated structure that allows us to be warned early on when there's still time on AI-related risk. Having this and having a comprehensive monitoring system to track AI developments across all of those key thresholds, honestly, I think would complement what we've seen the experts call for. All of those things would complement the AI Cooperation Commitments Report card. So if I just, in a nutshell, if I just say back what I just said, if we are to have within the deliverable of the summit an AI Cooperation Commitments Report card, I would say that it could be complemented by a multifactorial approach on risk threshold that accounts for model continuation, a warning system for AI-related incidents, and early warning systems for AI-related risk, as well as a monitoring system to track AI development across those factors. Without those points, we won't have effective international governance when it comes to risk thresholds. Thank you so much.
Well received and clear and loud. So now we were talking about these commitments. So I just wanted to make sure that we have actually follow-up commitments. And it seems that governments here have been called by the companies themselves to sort of track the commitments and help them develop standards. So I would like to hear from UK DCIT about this.
Sure. Thank you. I was just going to say to your point about how companies are following up on the Seoul commitments, I just wanted to underscore, I know a few people have mentioned it, but ahead of the French AI Action Summit, 16 companies around the world will be publishing their safety frameworks. Actually, it will be slightly lower than that because some already have, including the companies in the room. But this will be a really rich source of information about how companies are currently thinking about risk management. There are more companies that we think may be signing up, and so I would just really, again, encourage everyone kind of just taking a quick look at this in terms of what's happening here. The expectation is that many of these will be first versions, so this is an iterative process to get to a kind of end-to-end risk management framework. We've already seen Anthropic iterate their version of the safety framework. And that's why it is really important to get kind of external review and comment on these so that, they can be improved over time, taking account of multi-stakeholder views. I would you made a comment just then about how these could interact with the code of practice, and absolutely, these are the types of documents that set out things around internal risk management, governance, etc., that you'd expect to see in regulation. I think there's 2 reasons why these documents that companies are publishing will remain important and complementary to regulation. One is that the details of some of the kind of approaches to risk management are at quite nascent stages and they need more scientific review. So to give you one example, exactly which risk thresholds should we be testing for? So when do we say, yes, this model is okay in terms of, can we buy a risk and no, it's not okay as past the threshold, which is a red line. Like within the UK AI Safety Institute, we have been doing a lot of work on that, and it's really, really hard. So that's the kind of thing where right now you wouldn't want to codify it in law. This is the exact risk threshold, because we need iteration on that. But we need to first put out what we're doing now so everyone can kind of comment on that. And then the second thing is, I think there is going to be, continue to be a role for how companies are kind of voluntary managing risks, and particularly the point that was made earlier, when a model is being trained, as the capabilities move out, there is a world here where we get very significant jumps. And so understanding on an ongoing basis how companies themselves are thinking about that over and above the regulation they're being held to, I think will continue to be important. So I will stop there, and I'm sure hopefully segue into what Chris might say. Oh.
All right, I will quickly say we are close to the end of our session. We will just have 30 seconds each. So what about you go next, the lady who is raising her hand, and then we'll have Robert Traeger and Axel Doche, and finally Senselek, but really try to stick to 30 seconds, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Very shortly, very practical, building on suggestions from the consultation and from Deborah's intervention. The standards for audits, yes, but please don't forget the full cycle, the ex ante part that was mentioned by a couple of people in the morning. So the impact assessments as well, please build them into the recommendations. And these need to be developed fully in the multi-stakeholder manner, not by the private sector only or the public sector only. So a new deliverable for the public interest AI would be increasing the resources and capacity stakeholders, public, private, and civil society, to develop harmonized standards for and then actually conduct meaningful impact assessments and audits in order to increase also the AI safety, because this is also a paramount component of the AI safety. We also encourage the AI safety institutes to include human rights risk assessment into their testing and evaluation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And yes, Robert Traeger, what are your proposals for?
Didn't they? There we are. Very quickly. Yes, I think it's worth looking at the track record of these of this series, which really has been quite extraordinary, thanks to many of the people in this room. And there aren't really other venues that do what it does. And it has this series, I think if we think about the things that it's accomplished in the context, for instance, of the COP process that many people have spoken positively about at the European Union, it's hard to really imagine that process taking the form and having been as effective as it had been without the prior work that took place in the context of the summit series. And so I'll just say that I'm really encouraged to hear about many of the things that people are talking about in terms of the outcomes, but also thinking about the future of the series, how that future can be assured. I think there's a lot that we could say about that, but I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. I think then we had Senselek.
Thank you very much. Obviously, I enjoy all the prominence of standards in this discussion. I'd like to highlight, though, that so far today, we've talked about standards meaning at least three very different things. Firstly, standards as a way of achieving interoperability and comparability. So that's the standards that make sure that any plug can go into any electrical socket, or that we can compare different model cards of different systems. So that's number one. Number two are standards in the sense of minimum requirements. So safety standards, minimum requirements on trustworthiness standards, and so on. And thirdly, we've heard about standards as a way of implementing regulation. And thankfully, Stephanie alluded to it this morning. Under the European system, there's this division of labor that regulation specifies high-level objectives, and harmonized standards specify an officially recognized way of achieving those high-level objectives. So I'd like to encourage us to distinguish, do we mean standards for interoperability, standards as minimum requirements, all standards as a way of satisfying regulation. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And we just have time for last 30 seconds from Axel Douchet, but I really want to hear from Stuart Russell and Chris Meserol at the reception afterward at the Chateau. So please keep your points. I want to hear from you.
Just 20 seconds. There will not be any global multi-stakeholder governance without solid local governance. So I'm calling for a very strong investment into what we can call democratic resilience, which can allow any country to maintain its system of governance, whatever be the evolution of AI. And that's very urgent. Every system of governance is different. So the solution is not one solution which fits all, but there is a need for a global coordination to build commons which will allow any country to be sustainably sovereign, under sovereignty, whatever be the evolution of AI.
Thanks. And I'm getting skeptical. I'm getting important sites from my team about time, but I think we should just get 30 seconds from Chris Meserol and Stuart Russell just to hear what they have to say. That's okay. Thanks.
I'll try to make it worth the payoff. Just a couple of thoughts. One, since Seoul was signed, or the commitments were signed at Seoul, I think pretty much my entire job has been implementation to some extent of the safety frameworks. We've worked our entire every work stream that we have is tied back to the safety frameworks in some way, and being able to deliver safety frameworks that are robust and responsible by Paris. There's a lot of work streams that we've covered off in that, including AI bio and security and cyber as well. The one thing that I'll flag as far as kind of standards that need to be developed and that were alluded to earlier, one was the comment I made earlier about we need to figure out which risks are actually most suitable for safety frameworks. We need to come up with consensus on who decides the thresholds and how and where they should be. We also need to decide, come up with standards for how we take the evals we're running on the safety side and map those to particular thresholds. So there's a lot of work ahead, but thanks for the chance to weigh in.
Thanks so much. And
maybe I'll interrupt Professor Russell for just a second because I have some good news and also some bad news. The good news is that we've strategically planned some buffer time. So that means we've done this. It's our 6th edition, so we've had progress. We have about 20 minutes where we continue giving closing comments. So Professor Russell, you can have more than 30 seconds right after me. The bad news is that I'm going to be as strict as Nicholas was earlier. So I'll ask you guys to leave those to keep those closing comments to about 45 seconds so we can hear from as many people as we can. And after that, at about 5:30, we'll head to our closing remarks and afterwards the reception. So with that, Professor Russell, please.
Okay, so I have 25 minutes. Is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah, so this is really a sort of parenthetical remark on the environmental impact line of work. I just want to make a plea for it to be fact-based. The decision to include it seemed to be made on the basis of a public upwelling of concern about the environmental impact. But that concern is based on what people read in the media. What they read in the media is often overstated by 2 or 3 orders of magnitude about the actual environmental impact of AI. If you read the International Energy Agency report, data center emissions have been flat for the last decade. So why are we all of a sudden getting completely Twitter-baited? Well, because the media are reporting that, AI has exceeded aviation in its CO2 impact. In fact, running ChatGPT is the equivalent of running one 737. So put another way, OpenAI is the world's smallest airline. So I really think we do need to get this in perspective. It does matter, but we have to make our decisions based on facts.
Thank you, Stuart. We want to be based on facts, indeed. So we also wanted to have closing words on the consultation in the interest of and the representation of the public interest. So Jean-Caton, if you want to give a few words now about this, and then I guess we can like go more to the final session with the concluding remarks from everyone.
Thank you very much. I don't want to take too much of your time. Just as I see from both the exercise we conducted all together, this consultation and the discussion here, I would like us to consider democracy not as a burden, but as a solution. It's the starting point, actually, of any of the paths we have to take to face the risks that emerge in the discussion. And I think we should really focus on that. We show that citizens are willing to take part to this exercise. They want to have greater access to knowledge about AI. They want to know more about the problem it poses, you know? And this is the first step that we should take to these other steps, building the right structures for citizen governance in the context of technical change. And actually, I just wanted to say that I'm quite impressed by the format we are experiencing now, that this could also be a very nice starting point, you know, to a multi-stakeholder approach that may converge all the different organizations that are involved in discussions at an international level. And just to conclude with, I just wanted to share the fact that we could draw inspiration from the Rio Earth Summit from 1992. Many people in the room maybe have heard me too much defending this approach, but as global warming was mentioned many times, I think we should consider this as an inspirational way to tackle the problems we face. I would just like us to remember the principle number 10 of this declaration, you know. Environmental issues are best handled with the participation of all concerned citizens at the relevant level. So it's not a burden, it's a solution. And I think we have the opportunity with this kind of format and the AI Summit, you know, to build the Rio of AI in some sort, or even more, maybe. And I think that concretely, this would mean giving a voice first to citizens. Thanks to the consultation we conducted with Make.org and many other organizations, we see that we have all the relevant tools to do so. And we can build at least a fair and robust agenda for both technical deployment and regulation. And as you mentioned, Anne, I think that we should build on commons, because commons are not only resources, it's a way to govern these resources. And we have many illustrations in the world showing us that it's a right solution for some of these resources. Standard setting institutions also show that very democratic processes in the past of internet history have emerged from these standard setting institutions. Regulation, if we consider it as a market building process, you know, extending democracy is a very nice approach too. It's not only about cutting heads to market players, you know. So there is no fatality. And I wish we could remember that actually democracy is not a burden, it is the solution. So thank you very much.
Well, that was the perfect conclusion for our session on the citizen and the expert insight on the summit. So thank you so much for your participation. Thank you to all the CSOs and the citizens that participated. We really value your ideas and your actionable proposals. So yes, the message is loud and clear. We need concrete, implementable, deliverable at the summit. We need accountability for large companies. We have a strong desire from citizens to be meaningfully involved in AI governance. And yes, now this is for you to take these ideas to action for the AI Action Summit. Thank you very much. And now on to Nikki for the next session.
Just want to say thank you again, but please go ahead.
Thank you for joining us. It was a pleasure. And sadly, I think some of our 20 minutes I said before have been taken already. So now we have 10 minutes, but I see some name cards that were already raised. Stephanie, did you want to say something, some closing comments?
I actually prepared this in relation to the last discussion, but you know what? It's also for closing, and just I think since we're closing, thank you to your team. It's really been a rich, productive day of discussion. I think one thing that I think we've heard from the last few speakers and consistently through today is the need to advance the science, the benchmarks, the measurements, and so I think starting first with the safety institutes, I saw in the last report that one of the recommendations was to sort of expand their role or see their continuation. And this is something that we actually have published in one of our reports very recently, that we actually see of the value of the safety institutes, including potentially to support with benchmarks and metrics. I think the point around mutual recognition is a really important one. Will there be mutual recognition agreements between the institutes, which I think will support their effectiveness? But I think it goes back to the question also of who. So I think somebody was talking to Ollie earlier, and there are 10 institutes now globally, I believe. And it was great to see Kenya has an institute. But when we talk about a global representation, what will the membership look like in the future? But not only that, I think there's a question of scope. What topics will be addressed by the institutes? I think 3 were addressed at the network of institutes convening: synthetic content, evals, risk assessment. But how do we make it representative of the needs of global countries? So that's the first. The second was in relation to also in terms of who's in the room. Metrology institutes are sometimes often left out of these discussions, which sometimes sit separately from standards bodies. So I always ask myself, why isn't the metrology institutes in a lot of these discussions? And so maybe this is a call to ensure that they are integrated in a lot of these structures. We also talk, when we talk about responsibilities, I think we've focused a lot on model providers as opposed to other sort of industry folks across the value chain. And so that's maybe something that we should be thinking about here too. Just very second, and I'm sure I'm taking up too much time here, just rattling through this list. The International Scientific Panel has come up through the discussion today. And I think that we've been thinking a lot about what should its role and responsibilities be in relation to the other parts of the kind of regulatory stack. And so how does it all work together? We have a scientific panel whose role is to kind of look at future risks. Will those risks pass to the safety institutes who do more, in-depth work? Will that then pass to the standards bodies who do the kind of, conformity assessment work? How will that flow work? I think is a question that should be resolved. And Henri, I think as part of the map that you're developing as part of the working group of the France Summit, that seems like a good opportunity to try and make that as clear as possible. My last 2 thoughts, and then I will stop and pass to others, is that even the report card, we do have the monitoring framework of the Hiroshima process, which we've heard through today. And so I think there's a question of how will those come together. And then finally, just an appreciation for the public interest group of the summit. I think it's been really productive, and hoping to work with Deb and others to really think through that auditing piece. But just to summarize.
Well, thank you. I think you gave a lot of us a lot of homework to go away. You certainly outlined a nice research agenda for us as a community to work on. Is there anyone that maybe hasn't had a chance to take the microphone and wanted to during the day that has any comments? I see one there, maybe.
Hello, thank you so much for a productive day. My name is Yann Lechel. I'm CEO at Probable, which is an open source company, essentially the scikit-learn company, which is the most downloaded framework in AI. It happens to be French, but it's a humanity benefits from it. Now, technology can be magical, and AI turns out to be quite deceitful. It has been in the past disappointing, but today it is deceitful because it is almost magic. And human beings stand to lose a lot if we keep being deceived by technology. So I think we need to come back to fundamentals in terms of semantics. We've talked about open source in a very light way today. We haven't talked too much about the open source definition, which is being contested right now. But I think it's quite simple. We need to define what is closed AI. Sorry, OpenAI, you're closed. I would suggest a rebranding to avoid being deceiving. And others are quite clearly closed, which is fine, right? But in opposition, we have the mandate, I think, to define what is truly open so that we do not deceive the future generations. We define what is open because this sort of AI, especially generative AI, captures knowledge. We haven't talked about knowledge today so much. And knowledge is a legacy to future generations that will need to learn the effort to learn knowledge. So we cannot let this sort of AI hijack knowledge to the point where we define it as loosely open source. It's not. It will be captured, essentially because GPT-4 models, well, typically it's about 100 million to train it, approximately. So who has access to that? So let's make sure that we define properly what is open source, what is not, and what is accessible in a way, because open source has given us the ability for access and therefore regulation down the line.
Thank you for that. Indeed, I think throughout the day, the concept of open source came up over and over again, and I think it's worth for us looking through more and more. There's a question right there, behind Kira.
Thank you very much. My name is Brian Tang. I'm from Hong Kong University. I lead Light Lab Law, Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship. You'll excuse me, it's about 1 a.m. my time, so I'm a little touch jet lagged here. I very much enjoyed today's session. Gave so much food for thought, but I think we ended up with a few different concepts. So one relates, what came to my mind was agency. I think with democracy, citizens want more agency in terms of how they can contribute towards things. So I have two thoughts along those lines. So the first is that most of the countries around the world are really users of the generative AI. We're consumers of it. We're not actually producing it. With the open source, potentially we could be producers, but we're still subject to the models. So I've been working on kind of in parallel to, I'm a lawyer by training, so I know the strengths of the law, but also limitations of the law. In terms of economic forces and incentives, thinking of a sort of fair trade of AI. So as we all are concerned about different elements of externalities, could there be some sort of modality in which different users, so I come from the financial industry, right? So if a bank wants to use a particular AI, what does it consider important? Maybe the environmental issue is important, maybe data provenance is important, maybe data workers' rights are important. It's really up to the user to consider. So that's one thing to put forward for consideration. The other one is around what I call humans working in the loop. So rather than humans in the loop, working in the loop. And that's actually along the line of what Sebastian over there was talking about. So ultimately, whether you're a data analyst, you're a data scientist, you're a modeler, you're a user, you're in the governance sector, we all have a role if you're a technologist in the production of this. And perhaps, I personally didn't like the word ethics because it's so fuzzy, right? But ultimately, it's what is it that's important? And I think that allows for an agency. So as we think about responsibility procedures, again, I come from finance, so like it or not, the liability goes beyond the corporate, but into the individuals. So that's one thing that perhaps people could consider as they think about the roles of such individuals within the creating of these systems. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian. I see the time, and I think we have room for 2 more comments. And I saw some hands raised there, Emmanuel. And there's someone behind me, Marco. Emmanuel, you can go first. Is there a microphone that we can hand to Emmanuel, the person towards the left?
Well, okay, so I'm Emmanuel. I represent VDE, an old standardization and testing body headquartered in Germany, but operating throughout Europe. I really enjoyed the sessions today. Thank you to Future Society for inviting me again. There was one topic that I kind of think should have come up a little bit more. It was touched on a little bit throughout the day. I would say the whole topic of deepfakes and misinformation. I've been holding out for the US election because I expected this was going to be the big moment that I would expect lots of misuses of AI. Surprisingly, it wasn't. But then a story from like a week ago in Romania, where they just had an election over there. And there was, it flew under the radar, but this was a case where the election campaigns were all littered with misinformation generated by AI. So I think that at least going forward in future, one of the things I would probably like to leave the room with is to, even though we didn't see it in the US election, to kind of keep an eye on what's going on in the misinformation space, especially with regard to AI, because I think that this is probably the largest challenge that's currently sitting under the surface that's not given as much attention as it should have. In all the dialogues that I've had, I was at JPI, I've been at the OECD, and OECD we had a session on trust in the age of AI, but it would be something I would like to listen to a bit more from the AI risk perspective. That's what I have to add to that. Thank you.
Great. And I'm afraid I'm the bad guy again. Before lunch, I encouraged you to take these conversations to one-to-ones during the networking. So I'll encourage you to do the same during the reception. I did promise one more comment, so you can go ahead, Marco.
Just a quick comment on this open consultation, right? So there are these 5 dimensions which you identified, right? Along with this example deliverables, which is okay. So good part of this 5 dimensions with sub-points are already covered in one or the other way, different parts, including OECD, EC, safety institutes, and so on. So this would be kind of good maybe to fulfill what's already around in similar shape at least, right? And another element which would be nice to see if it's possible to project, right? So what kind of numbers would be attached to all these sub-points, right? So that we see what's realistic in what time frame roughly and for how much money as well, right? So a lot of things are going on, right? So, and matches nicely your structure. So everything won't be implementable, but some things might be, yeah. So this is just practical advice, right?